A death that would end a war, a death that would inspire artists all over the world, and a death that is covered in mystery. Did Queen Cleopatra take her own life, or was she forced to take her own life while she was on top of her game? Hello everyone and welcome back to a new video. First of all, I want to thank you so much for watching my videos. Lately my video about the mermaids is doing very well and I'm so excited because sometimes I'm like, okay, why do I make these videos? Nobody's watching them. But now you guys give me comments and you say you love my videos, which gives me a lot of confidence to go on with my videos. I really love making them and feel free to ask for a subject that you like, as long as it has something to do with mystery. I'm all up for it. In this video I will discuss the most famous queen that has ever lived. Recently there has been a lot of controversy about her skin color in a new Netflix docu-series. I want to point out that it's not really a documentary because, well, I come back to that later in this video because I will also discuss her ancestors and etc, etc. And since I already wanted to cover her story, I thought it was time to do it because now everybody's talking about her and I already made a small script and I had to search for more information, but eventually it worked out, so here we are. And since this is a mystery channel, I wanted to focus on how she died, but of course I will also give you information about her life and of course her lovers. And I'm really curious how she died because I've always wondered that since I was a little girl. Her life has been an inspiration for many playwrights, for stories and for films, etc, etc. They turned this real-life queen into a mythical figure. The beautiful queen who used her beauty and power of seduction to seduce two Roman leaders. A romantic drama that mainly focuses on her beauty instead of her intelligence and wit. We don't even know if she was truly beautiful, but she must have had some charm or a lot of power to gain so much influence. One thing we know for sure is that there was something special about Cleopatra, and that's something we cannot deny. We are still intrigued with her more than 2000 years later. And I've always been intrigued with Egyptian stories and especially the one from Cleopatra. I already covered some Egyptian mysteries, so if you want to see them, I will put the link in the description to the list that I made. When I was young, I hardly knew about other queens except Cleopatra, and my cousin also had a lot of Egyptian stuff in his room, and that included a statue of Cleopatra. I always loved and admired how she reached the top. She was very intelligent and charismatic, and she knew a lot of languages, which is something that I also really love. Languages, I mean. But still, there's always something new to learn about her. In this video I will discuss her life, her legacy, the myths, the mysteries, but I will mainly focus on her death and the mysteries surrounding that, because after all, this is a mystery channel. So jump on your camel and travel with me through history. I have a feeling that you already know a lot about Cleopatra, but I will give you some information to fresh things up. Keep in mind that the stories that I'm gonna tell you have been passed on for many generations, so it's probably not the entire truth. And I'm also not a scholar or an investigator, so I always try to find my information on the internet, and of course I compare them, but I never know if it's truly factual right. Cleopatra was born in 70 BCE or 60 BCE as the daughter of the Macedonian king of Egypt, Ptolemy XII Auletes. And his name is longer, but I won't bore you with that, and I'm probably gonna say it wrong anyway. He was the son of Ptolemy XI Soter II, but his mother was not the wife of Ptolemy Soter, but his mistress. And since the fully Ptolemaic family suddenly and violently died, Cleopatra's father was next in line. Therefore he became the king of Egypt and was crowned in Alexandria in 76 according to Egyptian rites. And before that happened, he married his sister, and her name was Cleopatra V Tryphaena. There were people against his coronation, but Ptolemy was very smart and he bribed a Roman general and the name of the Roman general was Julius Caesar. And he will also play a big role in his daughter's life. But more on that later. Julius Caesar received 6,000 talents from Ptolemy. I couldn't really find what it's worth in today's money. Some websites say it's a few $billion and other websites say it's $60,000. Either way, it was a lot of money back then. In return, Caesar passed a law acknowledging his kingship, although this did not solve the problem entirely. Ptolemy was deposed because he lost the island of Cyprus, and the Egyptian people didn't really like his submissive attitude towards Rome. Long story short, he bribed a lot more Roman influential people, and he was once again the king of Egypt. But his bribery would eventually leave Egypt in financial trouble. Back to Cleopatra. She was named after her mother, and her full name was Cleopatra VII Thea Philopater, which translates to Cleopatra, glory of the father-loving goddess. She was of Macedonian Greek descent, so she had little or no Egyptian blood, but she was born in the city of Alexandria, which is in Egypt, which makes her of course Egyptian, although she described herself as a Greek. She may have had Syrian blood as well, but this has never been confirmed. Nobody truly knows her skin color, but since she was Greek Macedonian, it's likely that she had an olive skin, or she was light-skinned, or maybe medium-skinned. This is how she's described by historians from that era, and how she's also portrayed in portraits and in art. The city of Alexandria, where she was born, was Greek, although it was located in Egypt. So Cleopatra grew up speaking Koine Greek, and historians claim that she was the only one of her lineage to learn Egyptian. It is also said that she spoke many more languages. Cleopatra had 2 older sisters, 1 younger sister and 2 younger brothers, which made her the 3rd born daughter. Her older sister Berenice IV Epipania ruled Egypt during the exile of their father. She became a sole ruler of Egypt in 75 BC. Eventually, she was overthrown and executed by her father. How nice. When the father of Cleopatra, Ptolemy, died in 51 BC, it was not certain who would get the throne. It was not like the next in line would get it immediately. There was a great controversy about who of the children would rule Egypt. And at this time, Cleopatra was 18 years old. Eventually, it was decided that Cleopatra would marry her younger brother, Ptolemy XIII, in Egyptian tradition, because incest was completely normal, and they were gonna rule together. The ancient Egyptian pharaohs followed the tradition of incest to purify their bloodline. Otherwise, Cleopatra could not claim her reputation as ruler of Egypt or even as a goddess, and she said she was a goddess, by the way, because she viewed herself as the goddess Isis, and she was the goddess of healing and magic, and she was also known as the queen of the throne. However, Cleopatra's little brother wasn't planning on sharing his throne with his older sister. A civil war broke out, and Cleopatra was forced to flee to Syria, which was during that time in the control of Rome. And as I mentioned before, Cleopatra's father was very sympathetic to Rome during his reign, and the Romans did not forget that fact. Both siblings aligned with different sides in Rome's own civil war. And this is where our friend Julius Caesar comes into the picture once again. He wanted to become a politician and Rome's sole dictator. And Caesar was at war with Pompey, and he was also a Roman general. Pompey lost the Battle of Pharsalus and had to take refuge in Egypt so that he could replenish his forces. But Cleopatra's brother had him killed and sent his embalmed head to Caesar, who arrived in Alexandria by early October, and Caesar resided in the royal palace. Caesar was not happy with this, but he was shocked and outraged by this gesture. And this was not the reaction that Ptolemy XIII was expecting. He wanted to gain favor with Caesar, but Caesar thought it was a cowardly act. And Cleopatra got word that Caesar was residing in the royal palace, and she really wanted to talk to him, but she wanted to talk to him face to face, which wasn't possible because she was not allowed to go into the palace. So she had to be very creative. There is one very famous story about their meeting. It is said that Cleopatra sneaked into Alexandria rolled up in a carpet so that she would not be caught by her brother and his forces. trusted servants carried her into Caesar's bedchamber, and when they placed the carpet in front of him, Cleopatra unfurled it. Other stories claim that she just dressed in an attractive manner and that she was so beautiful that Caesar was flabbergasted and wanted to talk to her. And she also charmed him with her wit. But if she was not allowed in the palace, I wonder how that story can be true. Caesar was about 30 years older than Cleopatra, and he was also already married. But they started a romantic relationship anyway. They pledged their support to one another. He would help her to regain her throne, and she would help him to gain power in Rome. That is a rhyme. She would give him money, and in return he would give her an army. First, Caesar declared that Cleopatra and Ptolemy XIII were co-rulers of Egypt together. But Ptolemy XIII did not agree with this. He knew that Caesar favored his sister over him, and he did not stand for it. He besieged Caesar and Cleopatra in his palace, and they were trapped there for months. Meanwhile, the younger sister of Cleopatra, named Arsinoe, started her own revolt against her siblings. Eventually, Caesar and Cleopatra were freed by Caesar's soldiers who arrived from Rome. They also defeated the army of her brother in 47 BC, which would result in the rise of Cleopatra to Pharaoh. Her brother tried to flee, but he drowned in the Nile River near Alexandria. It is not sure if he was killed or if he just committed suicide. Or he got unlucky and fell off his boat. Her sister Arsinoe was also captured, and she was forced to go to the temple of Artemis in Ephesus. And she was executed later on by the orders of her sister and her new lover, Mark Antony. I will come to them later in this video. Cleopatra would rule together with her other brother, the 12-year-old Ptolemy XIV. They also got married because that was the only way that she could rule without question. So her brother only reigned in name, while Cleopatra was the true leader of Egypt. So Cleopatra finally became pharaoh, and she had 2 months left with Caesar before he was to return to Rome. During this time, she was already pregnant with Caesar's son. Although we don't know for sure that it truly was his son, she was very vocal about it, and she even named her son Caesarion, and not the Caesarion from the when you give birth, it's just another name. But Caesar, he never spoke about his child. Maybe because he had no children with his wife Calpurnia and he wanted to be respectful towards her. But he should have thought about that earlier before cheating on her if he wanted to be respectful towards her. Cleopatra wanted to marry Caesar, but this was not possible. It was not permitted by Roman law to marry a foreigner. And of course, Caesar was already married with his wife. So Caesar eventually returned to Rome, and a year after he returned, Cleopatra came to visit him with her son Caesarion. Some sources claim that she went alone, but I couldn't find which one was true, so choose for yourself what you like more. Cleopatra didn't go there for Caesar alone. She wanted to convince the Romans that Caesarion was the only one and true heir of Caesar. She stayed there in late 46 BC, and she could reside in Caesar's villa. During her stay in Rome, Caesar was assassinated on the Ides of March on the 15th of March 44 BC, but she did not leave right away. She stayed there until mid-April, and especially now because she still wanted everyone to recognize her son as Caesar's heir. She did not succeed, unfortunately, because Caesar's will named his grandnephew Octavian as his heir. Cleopatra departed to Egypt, and a few months later Ptolemy XIV died under mysterious circumstances. It's unsure if Cleopatra had a hand in his death, but many historians claim that Cleopatra poisoned her brother to elevate her son Caesarion as co-ruler. And this would mean that she had a hand in the death of 3 of her siblings. I'm not going to bore you with more political information, but I will discuss another romantic relationship that Cleopatra had. And this relationship would lead to her downfall. The Roman politician and general Mark Antony was an ally of Julius Caesar and the main rival of his successor Octavian. Mark Antony was Julius Caesar's second in command. He had heard rumors about the plot against Caesar, but he was not able to warn Caesar in time. Antony had to flee Rome dressed as a slave, but he returned to Rome to protect Caesar's legacy from the senators who conspired against him. He was not a supporter of Octavian, but Antony was a great leader, so therefore Octavian tolerated him and wanted him on his side. Antony ascended to power as one of Rome's 3 joint leaders. So where did Cleopatra meet Mark Antony? She went to see him in Tarsus, which is in modern-day Turkey, in 41 BC, because she wanted to maintain the close relationship between Rome and Egypt. She arrived in high style on a ship and in the finest clothes and jewels to impress everyone. Mark Antony was among those people, and Cleopatra invited him to come to Egypt. He visited Alexandria by November 41 BC, and the people in Alexandria were very happy to see him because he helped to restore Ptolemy to his power, and he did not bring his forces with him. He enjoyed the lavish royal lifestyle, and together with Cleopatra he even formed a drinking society. It did not take long for them to fall in love and start an affair, because once again one of Cleopatra's lovers was already married. Eventually, Antony had to leave Cleopatra to return to Rome. He had to report his triumphs, and he also had to deal with the aftermath of his wife and brother-in-law's failed rebellion against Octavian. And in his absence, in the year 40 BC, Cleopatra gave birth to their twins. She named them Alexander Helios and Cleopatra Selene. And Helios means sun and Selene means moon, which is beautiful. Antony and Cleopatra didn't see each other for 3.5 years, and in the meantime Antony had to marry the sister of Octavian, and her name was Octavia, because his wife had died of an unknown illness. And since he didn't visit Cleopatra for such a long time, he was probably very happy in his marriage. But eventually the lovers would reunite again in Antioch, which was the capital of Syria, and this would happen in 37 BC. It was like no years had passed and they rekindled their romance. Antony was meeting his twins for the very first time, and Cleopatra was ruling almost the entire Mediterranean area. Antony decided to live with Cleopatra in Alexandria, and another son was born to them, and his name was Ptolemy Philadelphus. They became very public with their relationship, and Antony helped Cleopatra to stabilize the east and to enlarge her domain. What seemed like a joyous time would become the beginning of the end for them. Back in Rome, Octavian got word of all that was happening in Alexandria, and he was not pleased with Antony. He did not want the foreign queen to enlarge her kingdom, because then she would become a threat to Rome. And he was also of the opinion that Antony neglected his wife and children, which was of course the sister of Octavian. Antony was also trying to circumvent Rome's policies, which led to many senators questioning where his true allegiance lied. It seemed like Antony wanted to become the co-ruler of Egypt and the other eastern kingdoms instead of helping the Roman Empire to gain more power. And the fact that Antony and Cleopatra paraded their children together with Caesarion as their heirs also didn't help their case. They even went as far as calling Caesarion the king of kings and the true heir of Caesar, which is of course something that Octavian did not like, since he was the true heir. And if this wasn't enough, Antony also divorced his wife Octavia, and this was the last straw. Octavian declared war, and not even on Antony but on Cleopatra. I will spare you all the details about the fights because there were a lot of fights. All I want to say is that Antony had a lot of supporters, but Octavian had a great naval general called Agrippa. He defeated Antony and Cleopatra in the Battle of Actium, and Antony and Cleopatra had to flee back to Egypt. But they were still being followed by Agrippa and Octavian. Now we have arrived at the end of Cleopatra's and Antony's life. And here is where the stories become very Shakespearean. There is no solid evidence when it comes to the death of Cleopatra. The accounts of her life were mostly written generations after her death by the Roman writer Plutarch and other lesser-known writers. The fact that her life is so interesting and full of drama creates room to write an epic end to her untimely demise. But is it possible that the stories we know are not even close to the truth? I will talk about a few scenarios that could have happened, and I will start with the story of Antony's death. Some stories claim that Cleopatra saw the doom of Antony coming, and she did not want her children to suffer the same fate. And since she was a very strategic person, she thought of an idea. She had word sent to Antony that she had killed herself because she was convinced that Antony could not live without her. Of course, she did not kill herself. According to the historian Plutarch, Antony received this letter and even uttered the words, "O Cleopatra, I am not distressed to have lost you, for I shall straightway join you. But I am grieving that a commander as great as I should be found to be inferior to a woman in courage." So he attempted suicide by stabbing himself with a sword. Cleopatra was very distraught and nervous, so she sent servants to bring Antony to her. She was heartbroken when she saw him dying in her arms, but she knew that this was the right thing to do, because in this way she could save herself and her children. Some stories claim that Antony realized that she was still alive and he tried to stand up because he regretted his decision to kill himself. But his wound was fatal and he would fall down in his own pool of blood. Mark Antony died on August 1st in 30 BC. Cleopatra had hoped to save herself by negotiating with Octavian, but she was captured by his men and her children were also taken hostage. It would not be long before Cleopatra would decide to take her own life, because she did not want it to be paraded as a trophy in Rome like her sister Arsinoe. There are several theories about the way that Cleopatra took her own life, but it is widely believed that she did take her own life instead of another scenario. This occurred on either the 10th or the 12th of August 30 BC. She was 39 years old when she died and she had ruled Egypt for over more than 20 years. Most of the stories mention that she used some kind of potion to end her own life. The most famous story is of course the suicide by an asp bite, also known as an Egyptian cobra. The asp would have been brought by her mates hidden in a water jar or in some flowers. It would have been easy to get an asp because they were very common in the area of Alexandria. They were and still are one of the most venomous snakes in North Africa. Cleopatra allowed the asp to bite her and she fell down dead on the spot. Her mates were also bitten and they did not survive this as well. But it could also be a symbolic symbol of her death. After all, Cleopatra was seen as an exotic seductress. A serpent would represent that perfectly. A serpent was also used as a symbol on the crowns of the pharaohs, which Cleopatra would place on her head from time to time, of course. Maybe this was her plan all along, to use a symbol of her own power to end her life. A farewell in style where she could show once again that she was the one in charge. There are some problems with the snakebite theory. Modern Egyptologists argue that not all the snake bites are deadly and the venom would spread and kill slowly and painfully. A cobra was also way too large to smuggle into a palace. These facts make it hard to believe that an asp or a cobra was used to kill Cleopatra and her two mates, especially in the short time that Octavian received her suicide note and sent guards to stop her from killing herself. Other Egyptologists and historians argue that it's more likely that she drank a lethal herbal concoction or applied a toxic ointment. This was also suggested by the ancient historian Strabo. This would be a quicker and more effective way to die. And the Roman writer Cassius Dio claimed that she had smeared a pin and placed it in her hair with poison that would be harmless unless it would come in contact with blood, which would destroy the body quietly and painlessly. A more romantic take on her death is that she felt so guilty over the death of Antony that she decided that she could not live any longer. In despair, she took her own life and joined him in the Golden Fields. Modern scholars don't think that the death of Antony was the reason that she wanted to kill herself. It could have been one of the reasons, but her main motivation was probably because she was afraid what they would do to her because they captured her and she was very powerful. So she probably just wanted to take the matters into her own hands. Other modern scholars believe that Cleopatra was forced by Octavian to kill herself. She was of course a very big threat to him, and it is believed that he decided to let her decide if she wanted to end her own life or if she wanted to be executed, and that she was free to choose however she wanted to do it as long as she did it. or he did kill Cleopatra, but he didn't want anybody to know it because that would maybe cause a war, so they came up with the story that she did it herself. Cleopatra's death ended the final war of the Roman Republic. Octavian would become Rome's first emperor in 27 BC and would be known as Augustus. Her death would also mark the end of the Hellenistic period and the rule of the Ptolemies of Egypt. The last pharaoh of Egypt was Cleopatra's son Caesarion, who was first spared but eventually killed by Octavian. With him, the ancient Ptolemaic kingdom of Egypt died and Egypt would become a Roman province. Her other children would grow up in Rome in the care of Mark Antony's ex-wife Octavia. This woman, I can't believe it. She had to take care of the children of her husband, who left her to see Cleopatra, to be with Cleopatra, and now she has to take care of his children. I hope that she was forced to do it. I mean, not that I like the fact that she was forced, but if she wanted to do it herself, she has no spinal cord or whatever you call it. Cleopatra was buried together with Mark Antony, but this tomb has never been found. But since we don't have her remains, we cannot find out what the cause of her death is. Last year there was a team of archaeologists who found a large tunnel near Alexandria, and they speculated that it could have been a long tunnel that would lead them to the tomb of Mark Antony and Cleopatra. But unfortunately they still haven't found it, so the mystery of the tomb and of Cleopatra's death remains. After doing all this research, I understand why we cannot stop talking about Cleopatra. Her story can be placed in so many categories. It has romance, it has drama, it has war, it has intrigue, it has... What doesn't it have actually? It's hard to really know what Cleopatra was like. She lived over 2000 years ago. We hardly have any information about her, only from some historians and things we have passed on from generation on generation, and maybe some of the information about Cleopatra was stored inside the Library of Alexandria. I made a video about that because the Library of Alexandria burned down. Anyway, we should not remember her as the seductress or the beautiful woman, but rather as the intelligent, strategic and witty woman she was. At least what we think she was. Because look what she achieved. And do not call her a boss lady, because that's very painful to my ears. So I was not able to give you an answer on how she died, but I hope you really enjoyed listening to all the theories and the mysteries. Feel free to choose what you liked best. If you like romance, choose the version where she was very upset about the death of Antony and wanted to kill herself. If you want her to be a smart woman that did not care about men, you can choose the other one. Feel free under the apple tree. I really hope that one day we will learn how she died, but I don't think we will. I really hope you enjoyed my video. Once again, if you have a subject for another video, let me know in the comments. And I hope to see you the next time. Bye!